Here comes the Nastygram.
Send a priest to save my soul, forget it.
Welcome back to the Nastygram RPG podcast. This is our final little roundtable wrap-up of One Shot at a Monster.
Too hard is the poison to the heart of a cynic redemption. Now I'm waking to pain to change.
All right, well, here we are, end of the road. One Shot at a Monster is done. I'm Josh. I was your dungeon master.
I'm Dean, playing the late, great Sir Adric Windmere.
I'm John, playing Dr. Merrick Hoffman.
This is Jake playing Avery Colburn.
The actual hero.
And Matt playing Keeler Ulson.
Nice. So, figures it'd be a cool chance to just kind of talk about how the campaign went and different elements. The only thing I wanted to throw in up front, because we unfortunately didn't record our session 0, we did one via Skype quarantine land. Is a how we kind of came up. This was not a game that we planned to play. It wasn't a story that I had in mind. We just said, you know what? Let's play a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Something that is quote unquote one shot, ended up being 18 fucking episodes, but relatively. And we threw it out and we said, all right, everybody pick one descriptor of what this game would be like. And the things you guys came up with were a hunt, idea of a hunt, that it would be low fantasy, deal with the elements, Arctic and specific, and a volcanic and rocky archipelago. So we kind of got our setting and motivation right from there. And when the idea of the hunt came up, we threw on the idea of everybody giving an aspect, kind of same way to the thing that you were hunting. And you came up with corrupting landscape, mind powers and motivations, auditory elements of power or weakness, and tied to the elder race. And I think that was a pretty cool way to come up with a basic game concept, and I think that all kind of came into play.
As the Dungeon Master, did you feel like that gave you good ammunition? Like, I mean, for us, it was easy. We just gave you a word. You had to take those words and turn them into a game. Like, how did you feel going into that?
I mean, it's funny. In some ways, this is like some of the least prep I've ever done for a game, because beyond that, then we said, like, we talked about characters and we had the whole motivations, merits, flaws, and bonds. And after we did character creation, it was like, okay, well, we did zero world building. We just knew it was going to be a generic world. And then I sat back and I let John kind of write up whatever he wanted to on the elder race, on the crystals, on how magic worked. Dean threw in some stuff about religion, and Matt painted most of the stuff about the North, and what the cultures and stuff. So it was different because I didn't do most of the game kind of prep stuff that I usually would rely on.
Right.
So uncomfortable in some ways. There were definitely some of the early sessions I sat down, I felt wholly unprepared.
Right.
But I liked that it kind of gave a canvas, a direction to work off.
Cool.
I had concerns about it feeling overly railroaded, because it did kind of start from a pretty simple motivation. You know, you're hunting something.
Right. I think if we can get meta to the meta, this is, if we're going to go, I want to go double meta for a second. And just say, you know, this is Nastygram, an RPG podcast, right? So you have a situation where you are sitting down to run a game, and if I'm not mistaken, your first game that you're running, Josh, on the microphone is recorded as a product to be released, correct?
Yeah.
So that said, there has to be a certain nervousness, not because of you, not because of any insecurity about your own ability, but just because, hey, this is suddenly a very different thing, right? So when you find yourself in that headspace, it does, and I'm curious as to how you feel, did you feel at times where that lingered in your mind as you were doing stuff? Did you find it ever overwhelming you a little bit?
Yes, I
Yeah.
definitely was almost continuously overcognizant of it being a product and being on mic and making a podcast and not just a game.
Right.
And yet the whole intent of this was to make podcasts that sound just like our normal games.
Sure.
I think at the end of the day, we accomplished that.
I agree.
But it was hard to like be in my own head about it, and I do think it affected my style or moments in certain ways. And there definitely were times when I just kind of forgot about the mics and about what we were doing, and part of that was getting more comfortable with it, and part of it was everybody.
Not that you would have this perfect memory or the perfect recall. Do you remember the moments when you did get lost looking back going, wow, I kind of forgot I was doing a podcast? Can you correlate that to any particular scenes or episodes?
I think it was just the moments when the people were having fun.
Sure.
You know, like not like we're not usually having fun, I hope. But like I think even
The part where I was consumed by it.
that was fucking
That,
bad.
yes. Where I killed it with the latent acid damage.
Maybe some of ironically, even beyond some of the role playing, because I know I feel pretty cognizant early on of talking on a mic when I'm talking in a character voice.
Of course.
So it was almost like some of the combat or conflict kind of scenes were some of the first stuff that just like they're fighting, you guys are fighting the Haval.
Right.
And it was just, that's just playing D&D and you're not really thinking about shit.
Yes. Yeah, because you're like, and we've all run games. Jacob has run great games. John, I don't think I've had the pleasure of playing in many, but I've played in one or two back in the day that I enjoyed. I've ran games once upon a time, and there's always that moment where you even mics aside, where you're just sort of imagining this moment, and the rules become secondary. So I was always curious, did you ever feel like the mics then also became secondary? But the Haval is a great example. It's this moment of, wow, what imagery, what a moment. And we kind of forget we're doing a show, which I think can be good in this particular type of program that we're doing. So it's interesting to hear you say that. That's really cool.
Yeah, especially because we're not like very mechanical or combat based.
No.
But sometimes it's those kind of things that can kind of pull you in because you just start thinking about the situation versus what am I about to say? What is my
Sure.
character about to say?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt like for me, the first couple, even like sessions, it was hard not to think about what I sounded like on the mic and the fact that, like, can I butt in here with a dumb joke that I would usually make? Like,
Sure.
But yeah, it was interesting to feel that kind of fade away a little bit at the end of it, where we had moments where we would have, jokey table talk that we would normally have in a normal game.
Yeah, the voice thing is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're playing a role. There are some RPG programs out there where it is literal voice actors who have learned how to play
Right,
D&D. They have a different style, and then you have stuff where we've played so much that a lot of times we just want to kind of try something different. And then when they stick a mic in your face,
Does that sound good?
So first of all, you got big balls, John, because you took on this. The aspect of Hoffman was really cool because you take on this thing where you're like, you see, like that's hard to maintain for
Yeah.
18 sessions,
Right.
man. So hats off to you. That's like that. That really makes a difference. Like, even I was like, well, I don't know what to do on my night. I'm just going to do generic night guy. So like it's hard to be like, what's going to be my quirk? And I think that comes, one of the things Josh did, like, you guys filled it in. That's a thing, you filled in. What is Hoffman going to be like? Matt as Keeler.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's amazing.
is he going to fucking do this the whole time? Because holy shit, that's
Yeah,
hard as
it's a lot.
shit to do. So man, that like that, the character voice stuff, that's difficult.
Yeah.
Man.
Matt,
That's
did
hard.
you just listen to a lot of Bjork?
No, I watched a few YouTube videos on like how to speak Norwegian. And like
that's
not
awesome.
listening
That's
to
dope,
the person
dude.
speaking Norwegian, but them speaking English being a
Oh, you should
Norwegian.
watch. You should watch the Norseman because that is the perfect. Because they all speak English, but they speak in an accent like
Very
these. Yeah.
exaggerated.
It's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
good.
It was
was
that
great.
and Twitch. There's a couple of Twitch streamers that I watch who are like Polish or Swedish and shit,
Oh,
but they
cool.
stream in English. So I'd watch them. Like I'd go back and watch a VOD for an hour before we sat down and played to just like get the voice inside my head, so I could be like, okay, this is.
It was
how-
really good, man.
Yeah,
it was
awesome.
completely noticeable. I had one of the dudes who hangs out with me at LSG asked me. He said, "Where is he from?" It was
Yeah,
Nate.
that's awesome.
Nathan,
Oh, no shit.
Nathan said, Who is that Matt?" He said. I said, because the way he talks, I said, dude, he's doing an affectation. Like
Yeah.
that's no shit. He's really like. And Nathan was like, "Damn, that's pretty awesome."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, like you said, we're not professional voice actors, but you guys did great with the character voices. Whether they were like, obviously Matt's was a lot to do,
Of
but even
course.
like the more subtle ones, you
The
guys kept them
Westerossians?
Yeah.
you kept it consistent,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where it's just what's important because we don't want this to be like an audio drama, and we do table banter and we talk about fucking stuff. As as soon as you don't have to constantly say, and then Avery says, you hear the voice kind of change,
Right.
So that was great. I had a hard time with NPC voices.
That's difficult. That's
and
the hard job.
And part of it too, I didn't get many to kind of roll with for a while. It was a lot
Yeah,
of one
yeah.
and dones and
Well,
but
Matt painted you into a corner for all the northern tribes.
I did kind
like
of feel
this-
bad about that.
Like, this guy studied fucking videos. So now I'm up against the wall over here.
I wanted to kind of go around each of you guys and ask how you felt about your characters, where they started, where they ended up with. Were you happy with the arc? Did you, were you surprised at all by your own characters? And were you happy with how they ended up? I guess is the two main questions from where you started. So I don't know who wants to jump on that one first.
I mean, we know Dean's answer on half of that already. She didn't want to end up.
I don't though.
underground.
Actually, I want to hear about that.
That's funny.
What about you, Matt? Tell me about how you feel about Keeler.
I liked him a lot. It was a lot of fun to play. I kind of wanted him to be. I don't know. I didn't necessarily want him to be like sort of angry and off-putting for most of it, but like just Jake as Avery was just like everything he said was like
So easy to hate.
yeah, like it was so hard to like just keep it where it was and not even be like, holy fuck, like can I poison him in his fucking sleep? Like we don't really need him. Like he's such a piece of shit. I hate this guy. And like
you
towards
know
the end, it was kind of nice to like, okay, like changing our character to Necessary Evil was like it made it a lot easier for me to look past a lot of that.
Yeah.
It's funny, Matt, because I feel like, people who don't know us, they might be like, do these guys not like each other in real life? Yeah. And with Avery, at first I was like, I'm going to play the pompous noble, kind of fish out of water and it'll be funny. But about halfway through the game, I was kind of regretting Avery. I'm just like, he's too like, cause it's just too confrontational and I don't know. I was a little worried about him just being a dick. And I was like, am I playing the bad guy here? Like, and it wasn't until we kind of had a conversation about the arc of our characters and like, are they going to stay the people they are or are they going to evolve? Cause I do feel like, in order for Avery to be a successful character, he needs to change. Like the what is happening, the whole situation needs to change him, or he needs to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, around the middle, I was kind of like, oh, maybe I made a mistake with this character. But by the end, I was happy with the direction it went, you know? And hopefully our listeners stick with it long enough to get past the bickering and arguing.
It felt sort of innocent and fun to me, but I don't have the outside perspective, so I don't know how valid that is. But I never felt, outside of one time where I thought Adric and Keeler might actually fight.
Yeah.
I thought everything's pretty fine here. It's just sort of kind of jokey in that fun way. We knew what the characters were going to be like going in. As Josh said, we all sat down and said, hey, I'm going to be this sort of guy who thinks my way's the best and not caring about this barbaric culture in the North, etc. And then the cool part is overcoming that, right? So we set it up kind of.
I'll jump in and say, as a DM, and even maybe more so as like sitting and editing and thinking about content, there was a point I was really worried, maybe 6 to 8 episodes in. And one thing that, listeners probably don't know is that we were also recording some of our Dungeon World arc concurrently. And I was like, fuck, man, I don't know. Is this game too serious? These characters not likable enough? Like everybody's like nobody. There's a lot of tension. Like the characters don't really like each other. I don't fucking know. Like versus the Dungeon World game, it was much lighter. The characters were like fun and kind of more lighthearted.
Sure.
But I really felt that the characters didn't prove me wrong. Just kind of my apprehensions were. It was unfair of me to put those out there on you guys being such great players because the rewards were there for all of them. Because the arcs, I think, were more significant because of where they started, both in like individual characters, but also the relationships. I thought there was some good payoff there. But anyway, John and Dean, I want to hear about your guys still.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way Hoffman went. I feel like I didn't explore some of the maybe flaws that he had or that I had said he had. As much as I should have, and maybe there wasn't really opportunity to do that in terms of like going beyond the norms. I mean, there was that scene where he was possessed, which was obviously a big part of why he wanted to do that and why I wanted to do that as the character to kind of explore what that would mean if he did do that. I felt like I was like, oh shit, did I get myself into too much of being like the person who has to explain the lore of the world that we don't even know what we're doing? Like having to come up with all these concepts, like what did I get myself into?
I put you on the spot a lot.
Yeah,
Sure. Can you tell me all about this?
Well, so yeah, sure. I'll just pull something out of my ass.
John gets credit as assistant dungeon master.
And Matt.
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
Yeah,
true.
The entire setting and culture that you guys played in, I didn't do fucking shit. I mean, I expounded on what I think Matt's intention was, but this was the least I've ever created running a game, I feel like, and just, tried to take the concepts you guys came up with and keep true to them. But.
I did like that, like you were saying, it got really serious in the mid there, but I wanted Hoffman to be kind of the middle ground for everybody, and I felt that went pretty well in terms of his dealing with Keeler and then with Adric. Maybe not so much with Avery, but I think Avery came around on his own anyway. But that was fun to be kind of not really comic relief, but more lighthearted than everyone else in a certain respect.
Well, I always felt like. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like it was like the necessary foil to the situation was like, you could communicate with Avery and Adric, but you could also, you and I could have a conversation and like you helped Keeler kind of bridge the gap a little bit and sort of, feel more comfortable around them. Because had you not been there, like he probably would have like led Avery off a wrong path somewhere, or like, oh no, this cave is totally safe. You go on into the back;
worry
it's
about it,
warmest back
guys.
there. Like,
I always thought, I always thought of Hoffman as the sort of bridge between the two,
Totally.
the two cultures. You know?
Yeah.
100%.
and I think
for sure.
Keeler, like at least for most of the game, like he thought Hoffman was like the leader of your party. Like he didn't like, yeah, sure, you guys are the Lord and the Knight, and like, no, he's the one that the prophecy talked about coming back. So like, you're obviously helping him. So whatever you say isn't super important because he's your leader, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, Hoffman to Aedric was somebody who 100% was, as Jake just said, a bridge between the two worlds. And I think that ended up working out well. Part of me is forced to think, to take some of the stress off of Josh in the mid, could we have developed a tiny bit more? And maybe you want to get into this once we get through our characters, but could we have, as players, have developed more to say, the North and the South are fine with each other.
Yeah.
There's no issues here. Because I almost feel like we went in feeling like we're going into a foreign land, and Keeler and his people almost felt like you guys are foreigners coming in, and it was instant,
Right.
like we were clanking heads instantly.
Yeah, we might have gone too hard.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think maybe not even too hard, just ill-defined. Because I think Avery was intolerant, which is going to put Keeler on edge instantly. And since it's obvious you and I are connected, my loyalty was always to Avery because we're from the same place. That, I think, also put me in the crosshairs inadvertently of Keeler a little bit. Right?
And it was a matter of, I mean, the merits and flaws and the
Sure.
bonds you guys had, they all made for good role playing material. And
Absolutely,
and, you know, Keeler's, weak believes outsiders are weak, or underestimates the strength of outsiders, whatever it was, something like that,
Yeah.
Matt. It's gonna create conflict when you have a proud knight,
Sure.
you know.
Sure.
And we did have a good conversation about where we were at with different inter-party conflicts, and like I said, it never, like, game wise,
Yeah, we huddled up, right? We
Right.
had that
Yeah.
huddle up.
and
Yeah.
it was more like I was never worried about, like, us as players, like we can deal with.
Of course.
I was thinking more about, like, oh, is this too
How many more episodes we're gonna
uncomfortable
have to get
for
through
the
this?
audience? Like, do they
Yeah.
want to
Well,
hear people that they like? And
Is
like,
it fun?
Sure.
I mean,
Is
is,
it
it
fun?
is it
Right.
fun?
Period.
You know,
Period. Is it fun? Yep.
and
absolutely.
I mean, we've had games in the past where I mean, like, you know, too much of that it isn't fun. Like if
Yeah.
if it doesn't change, you know, if there isn't a payoff, if you're just like, we're gonna go through this until we finally are done, then yeah, that's not really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of the, because realistically, we'd only known each other in game for like a week for most of
Sure.
that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Before we got up to, oh man, I can't even think of the first village we got to.
Sveinheim.
yeah. It would have been silly for it to change faster than that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the realities of
Right,
the
right.
passage of time, and
Really, the council and the trial were probably the moment, I think, where we all kind of understood where we were together and how to become more of a team, because we all were going through the same trial as each other. And I think maybe earlier on, some of those conflicts should have maybe been those catalysts, like the Haval or even some of the combats. Maybe they weren't dire enough to be that.
Yeah.
Where you kind of are, your soldiers in arms at that point. You're friends on the battlefield at that point.
how'd you? So, just to finish this up, how'd you feel about how Hoffman wrapped up? Were you?
I felt it was good. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of gonna. I picture him as a traveling, scholar. He's a bard and a scholar at the same. Like I feel like that's where he ended up.
Yep.
Not giving in to the temptation of knowledge from the Arctogram, and kind of giving that up for saving his friends.
Yep.
Or most of his friends, at least.
Yeah, I'm glad we saved Dean for the end, because your character did die,
He did.
Yeah.
and so you don't have to start with that, but I want you to get to it for sure.
So, I really enjoyed Aedric after a little while. So, what's interesting about just the whole setup of this game is we have this sort of skeletal structure about what we want to do. And then the idea is we're going to fill this in as we go. So when we sit down to do this, we have some ideas, we throw them out there. But I think what I, as a player, really benefited from, and what Aedric definitely benefited from, was this idea that he could evolve his bonds and merits and flaws over time. Because I just kind of threw some out there thinking, I think these will work, but then found myself struggling to implement them.
Yep.
I think specifically, I think what happened was specifically I had this envy piece, this idea of envying these groups that were successful, whereas the Order of the Blackstone was sort of failing, and I just didn't see a lot of opportunity, and not from the DM, but from myself to sort of implement that and make it work. So I was like, I don't really see how this is going to work, and I started to think I think I want to change and abandon this a little bit.
Yeah,
and that's when obviously he is proud, but pride wasn't his flaw. Because there were many times over where he should have been dueling Keeler instantly if that was the case.
Yep.
Any insult, anything like that, he would have been like, pick your weapon. You want to do daggers? Do you want to do staffs? We'll go to first blood. That. But I'm like, I don't want to do that, A, because it sucks for the DM. I don't know if it's great to listen to, and it's been done. So I was like, all right. He's definitely a proud knight. He cares about shit like anybody was, right, in a sense. But I didn't want to make that his flaw. So I was like, I don't know. How do I do this? And that's when I think the most interesting moment for me as a player, and conversely, and thusly, Aedric as a character, was the Vision Quest. Because I think that was the moment where I could really see implementing something that I think could really alter his character. And I had this vision of how he could have ended. He ended up dying, which is fine. We can talk about that. But I had this idea of, had he lived, and this might be interesting for people to hear, had he lived, he was going to pull his breastplate off and stay in the North and just give it to Jake and say, because my vision was Jake's Avery's arc, he was going to come around on the heroism, he was going to sacrifice, he was going to show us something, and he absolutely did. And my thought was, if we defeat Okrugurm and Aedric lives, he's done. Like he realizes he was in it for the wrong reason. And that would have been the cool thing. He still realized that in the midst of it all, which is cool. So, and then I imagine him going home and maybe even saying Aedric was lost and just letting me be dances with fucking wolves, up north, and just growing a giant beard and looking like Lancelot in the third act of Excalibur. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I had that kind of vision for him. It didn't play out that way, which is okay, because I still do like the way he ended. Obviously, when your character dies, you're like, fuck, what a bummer. But it only feels shitty if you don't do anything. If your character kind of dies on a fluke, especially in a game where the timbre is a bit serious, I don't mind losing characters. That's not even a big deal. You would hope that he doesn't open with a breath weapon and just roast you on the first round. And you're this knight who's traveled all this far. And that's cool if it's Game of Thrones and I got another character waiting in the wings. But also, I don't. So the fact that I probably eclipsed 150 damage on him.
Oh,
Right.
I felt pretty good about dying when I did. I thought cinematically, to be frank, in my head, it looked amazing. Just this idea of all the lights going out in the cavern, this glowing sword just hacking on his head, leaving the blade stuck in his head glowing, so as I'm dying, my friends can still see him. That's really epic shit.
Yeah.
So I don't mind dying the way I did. I was happy with the last words I was able to give to Avery, which was really cool. So yeah, the way I died, although not what I pictured, because you don't just plan for, my guy's going to die. I started to think, to be perfectly frank, if we're sitting here at this table being honest men, I felt like it started to enter into, it's absolutely going to happen between what Jake said and what Josh was doing as a game master. I was like, I think they're pushing for this because it seems like a cool way to wrap up Jake's arc. And I felt like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. But by the end of it, I was fine with it. But I did feel like, I think they're going to make this happen as players and a DM no matter what.
So there was never any
I know there wasn't a
outside
discussion. But I don't think it needs to be. I
Right.
think it was intimated.
I will say, I genuinely thought it was a coin flip, and I didn't plan on it. I said, we're going to go into this combat. You know, at that point, I knew Adric was going to be the prime enemy of
Sure.
Artogrim. He's bearing the shield.
He did 150 damage.
He fucking is absolutely right. So not only, you know, you're sitting there absorbing the hits. I mean, he was just going after you over
Absolutely.
and over and over.
Yep.
And you know, I knew that if anyone was likely to die, probably Adric had the highest chance.
It's fair.
But I also thought part of it is Jake's character, but also Jake as a person
yes.
is such a contrarian in some ways that I thought there's a genuine chance that you would use it to flip script and fate on its head. So when that moment presents itself, like, all right, this is perfect. Adric's helpless. The shield is down. Arctogrim is going to go after the shield. And I gave you, you know, in a very non-D&D mechanics opportunity to go for one or the other. I thought it was a coin flip which one he went for.
Damn, now you're making me wish I'd gone for Adric.
I don't think there's a bad...
I don't think there's a bad answer.
But I could see Avery and you, Jake, saying, fuck the shield, fuck fate.
Uh-huh.
I'm taking Adric and we'll figure it out. We'll fight out of there.
right.
Yeah.
Can I say something before you answer?
But
'Cause
putting
this
you
is
in
your
that
character.
situation was you know, maybe trending that direction.
Right. So even though you sort of take Aedric's fate out of the player's hand, which could feel railroady to somebody listening, I felt like from a story perspective and where we were and what he already contributed, that it was totally fine.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's okay not to have a discussion ahead of time. I also think you can do that too and make it still kind of work. Like we've done that before. Where like we said, hey, pull a guy aside, hey, I don't think my guy makes it out of the session. Go ahead and work it in. And now you free up the DM to do something really cool, right? Like,
Yep.
cool, I'm going to kill this Jedi right now and nobody sees it coming. So I'm not saying that's necessary because there's no right answer here. But I definitely felt like it was taken out of my hand, but that's okay because I still think it wrapped up nicely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say that it was probably the closest thing to the fact that Adric's life was going to end up being obviously everybody's life's in jeopardy to some extent, but
Of course.
I knew I kind of planned that Adric, it would be a coin flip at best, and
Right.
not literally having a plan of him getting out or not.
Totally.
And I didn't talk about it, and part of it was, hey, we're playing a beginning, middle, end story.
Sure.
This is it. This is the last session.
Right. I don't think it's necessary to be
yeah.
clear. I don't think you're wrong. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it played out fine. Right.
So
That's pretty much it.
my thinking with going into that final kind of act, I thought for sure, I was like, there's no way that we are all getting out of here alive. Like Josh had kind of talked about, you know, I'm not pulling any punches, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't think we were making it. And going into it, I was like, well, you know, you're right over there?
Yeah, I'm just choking on my drink.
All right. Going into that, I was thinking it's either Adric, Avery, or both who don't make it out of here. And you know, I'm always trying to think like, you know, especially because it is a product we're releasing, but just because this is how I think, I'm always thinking like narratively, what's going to be cool, what's going to
Sure.
make sense, and part of my thought process there was like, well, mechanically, Avery's got fucking shit for hit points. You know, and literally, like, he could have been one-shotted by that thing.
One shot at a character.
Hoffman could have been fucking spit roasted.
Oh yeah, for sure.
and you know, my thinking after the whole dream sequence where I saw Adric's tomb and him being the hero, I was kind of thinking of this idea of, to be a true hero, you have to make a true sacrifice, and that Avery wouldn't really be willing to do that until the very end. So I thought it would be cool if Avery's arc concludes with him becoming a hero by making that ultimate sacrifice and dying. So I was hoping going into that last fight, like, if Avery dies, I want him to die in a way that does make him finally become
Sure.
a hero. And part of that was, but it also went the other way of, like, you know, he sees that Adric is willing to make the sacrifice and sees him as the true hero. So I was kind of like, cool, this will work because it allows both potential paths to be a good way to wrap it up.
Either way, right?
Yeah.
It's a good call.
I was really happy with the way your final words and everything worked out, because I thought it was a great way for Avery to get what he wanted and give it up at the same time. He wanted to be perceived as a hero, and he could have taken your last words and been like, this is what he said to me, I'm a hero. But instead, he took those words and essentially applied them back to you by putting them on your grave.
Right.
In a way saying I don't need this.
Right.
I don't need to be known as this. I don't need everyone to know that his last words were to tell me how great I was.
Right.
Yeah, and so I was very happy with that conclusion, and in another way with the whole way the stupid fire acid arrow thing worked. Fuck! I thought that was another cool way to kind of conclude Avery, because he, I like this idea that we're at the very end of the fight and he pulls back his sword and screams and he's about to deliver the killing blow, and then he realizes he doesn't have to, and he doesn't take that glory, that unearned glory by stabbing
Swipe at
it.
the dead body.
He just stops and he's like, oh, it's done, it's over.
The thief and Conan the Destroyer standing on the thing after Conan kills it, right? You don't feel this necessary I stab it one more time and put my foot on it.
Right. He's like, oh, he doesn't need to get the kill blow and get the glory. It doesn't matter anymore.
Doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
Hoffman got all the XP. So.
In retrospect, Hoffman's the only hero. He killed the Octogram and the Haval.
True.
So I don't know what the rest of you guys did.
Fucking magic, man. Magic. Fucking voodoo magic, man. Yeah, that's it's cool. It's interesting to think about how it all ends up playing out in the end. I was wondering how Avery's arc would conclude, right? Because it's an interesting setup to be, I want to be perceived as a hero. And then you get to a point where you realize, so I'm wondering how you feel about this, Jake. I'm wondering, how does Avery feel halfway through when he's freezing and his fingertips are falling off in the north, and you realize this is what I've committed to. And then you realize you've bled with these men, and suddenly you stop even caring about being perceived as a hero because you are one. There's almost an interesting irony there, right?
Yeah, I thought that was the kind of obvious way that it would go, but yeah, that you reaching this point of first reaching the point of, wow, this is totally not worth it.
Right, of course. We all probably felt that moment,
right,
when we failed a couple exhaustion checks.
And I mean, and you can think of plenty of real world examples where, you're like, I want to do this thing. And then, it's hard.
Yeah, no shit.
And you might want to give up several times, but then kind of, the idea of coming full circle to I don't really care about how I'm seen, but this is the thing we have to do. And I mean, it's a little bit of a trope,
Doesn't matter.
But it seemed like it's funny when we started playing, right? We were like, oh, we're going to have merits and flaws. We didn't really talk about the idea of resolving those flaws.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, I think, the point at which I was like, fuck, I don't know if I like this character. If there's not going to be an evolution to these things.
I struggled with the same thing earlier.
Yeah.
I was like, well, how am I going to implement this?
Right. But then we did.
So
it was cool.
I want to jump in here because this brings me to one of my biggest regrets, and I want to get John and Matt's thoughts. So going into the last few sessions, I kind of had some hopes of giving each character kind of some heavy story weight, and I worried in retrospect that fell short for John and Matt, mainly because I didn't present it in the right way. So it was kind of obvious going into those last few sessions where Adric and Avery's arcs were headed. Whether or not either or both lived or died, it was kind of, I knew what Adric was struggling with and kind of in character and out of character, like which way is Adric going to go with this? Same thing with Avery. There was some good role-playing moments for both. And then I had these I really wanted the temptations of Octogrim, not to like really go through, but I wanted it to have payoff for John, this character who the whole time, your whole thing is about the Elder Race and the crystals and fucking all the shit. And honestly, as a DM, I'm like, for a lot of the game, I'm just like, I don't want to do more world building. And, and I want to keep the kind of focus,
in here,
but give you enough. And then get to the fact that what we've alluded to the whole time is that Octogrim was not a product, but an enhancement tied to the Elder Race, and that he had everything to offer you. And same thing with Matt, where the resolution of like, fuck, is Octogrim actually better for your people? Maybe not that the healer would think that, but just to see the opportunities. I just want it to be a little bit more of a struggle, and I felt like I failed to set that up for both you guys by not really getting it until you were in combat. And it's like, well, at that point, it's...
Well, I mean, yeah, it's hard.
So did you guys kind of feel... Did you feel unresolved with that shit?
Maybe a little bit. I think it's hard in the midst of combat when you know that this creature, what its plans are for the world, number one, and is breathing fire literally down your neck. To go like, oh well, maybe I can just learn. Like, okay, maybe I will take the knowledge route or whatever. Like, I don't think Hoffman would ever necessarily be tempted by that. That said, had it been that, I mean, obviously, because he got possessed kind of late in the game, that connection with the Octogrim maybe didn't exist long enough for him to feed him knowledge and feed him maybe he would have seen the utopia of what the Elder Race had and what it could be again. That kind of temptation of you have the knowledge of what it looked like and what they did with magic and yada, yada, yada. And when, it comes to the end where you're like, well, he can restore that. Like maybe that kind of.
But part of where I really lost the kind of idea of where I was going was honestly when you guys went back into, like, you took the chance. I didn't think you guys were going to do it. And then I didn't fucking think you were going to roll a 1.
Yeah.
Because it got so bad that then it kind of closed it off completely.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like, oh, fuck, I kind of missed my opportunity to inject
then,
more.
Yeah, then you could have been like...
Because I didn't want to introduce it in combat.
Right.
I wanted it to be the seeds.
Yeah, when I roll the 1, you're like, oh, well, you have this vision. You are in this dreamlike land. You are in the Elder cities and, there's flying cars and shit. But
it was just too good of an opportunity to struggle with the other players.
Yeah, but the thing is, at the end of the day, in the D&D game, there's going to be winners and losers when it comes to story arcs. I think that just happens naturally, and I think in general, a lot of times, naturally, the story will find its main characters, and it's fine. Sometimes you're the main character, and sometimes you're not. Like, it's still fun to play.
That's a really good point.
It's still fun to be in the story and like. Listen, it's fun to listen to Dean talk and whatever. It's fun to be at the table and enjoy the story as you're in it.
It's a great point, John.
The organic element is important, and it comes right back to the question of character death. Character death can be great, when it's worthwhile, but it's always I don't want to make audio drama. I don't want to do scripted shit unless it's like a cutscene or something like that.
Yeah.
I want it to happen organically as possible. And you're right, it does. Sometimes that also implies. But what about you, Matt? With what I asked, did I don't know? Did you feel at all like you didn't end up with enough story juice at the end, and did that whole the idea of like this different? I guess I leaned my failure maybe with you was I held back too much of the hey surprise, like here's the reveal is like all these people are up there, so you didn't really have time to contemplate like. Was it bettering them? I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think, maybe as a podcast, it didn't come across that way. But like for me as a player, like I felt very satisfied. Like, when we got up to that, idyllic, city on, town by the river, like as a player, in game, I couldn't really be like, holy fuck, like this is amazing. Like shit, maybe like in my own head as character, I was like, fuck, like it. I mean, maybe he could make it better for us up here, but like he also wiped out an island. Like he's possessed and attacked, compatriots and friends. And I think also like I got to do so much world building that like I didn't really need more. And also just because I'm who I am, like Keeler already has like a whole other arc in his head that he's gone off and done. I wanted to get the bones of the Arctogrim as the bone carver. Like in my head, like he's made a carving to help him fend off the frost, and he's going north to find the ice elves. Like he needs to find out what happened. Where did they go? Like, so for me, he's off on another thing on his own. So like whether or not it's in the game or not, Keeler lives on in my own head and fucking is still doing shit.
That'd be almost a cool epilogue, like Keeler fucking carving his bones, and he's like, "Oh, this is just the beginning." Yeah.
Yeah, and like Adric,
he's the star of the spinoff.
Well, it's for me too. It's a shame that Adric died because him saying like I would have stayed in the north. Like Keeler absolutely would have fucking carved him up some fucking shit too, and like let's go north. Like let's go find out what the fuck happened.
The Barbarian brothers.
Yeah, like what was that bond we had?
God damn it! You put me on the spot.
Conviction of a Warrior.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you,
like,
Josh.
We've now bonded in this battle in these times, and he survived all of this. Like he's blown my flaw out of the water. Like the strongest people I've met have come from the South. Like, so
Cool. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's between the audience and the players, I'd rather the players were completely satisfied because that's why we do this.
Yeah.
We hope it translates.
Right.
To your question, Josh, I definitely felt like going into the last session, the twist, the reveal that like, oh, there's like this oasis. I was like, oh, this is a cool twist. But part of me did also feel like, but we all kind of are aware that this is the last session. So I was like, it sucks because it's a cool twist, but we don't really have an opportunity to debate it and go into detail.
Yeah.
I'd way rather have spent a game and a half debating that than debating corporal punishment.
Right. I mean, and part of that, like a production thing was that, we were on a scheduling timeline, and maybe Dean asked earlier about like regrets. Fucking never want to do that again, where I feel like a game has to end at a certain date because, there was personal baby having stuff that was forcing that. But the last several sessions, I felt really constrained to make sure the story stayed on pace at the cost of exploring certain things more.
Question about that. Did you ever feel caught between two worlds as a dungeon master? We have something called one shot at a monster, these throwaway characters, maybe they all die, maybe they all live, and then it turns into, wow, we have motivations and goals and growth arcs, and at the end of the day, this troop of players, at the end of the day, we are who we are. And we turn this fucking one shot into 18 sessions of like emotional character building because you can only put the glasses on Clark Kent. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're just going to be what the hell we are at the end of the day. And I wonder if at times you felt caught as a dungeon master in between, it's one shot a monster, let's go. But this guy dies. This doesn't matter. Let's rock and roll. And then it just became something more. And to be frank, I'm happy that it did. Yeah, but I was wondering, did that affect you as a game master, as a storyteller?
I think maybe at points, but on one, some of it was as early as like character creation, where I'm like, okay, we're doing this monster hunt, and we're gonna go after this thing, and it's kind of low fantasy, and then it's like, okay, we have this fucking artificer who uses power crystals, and like, what the fuck? I don't even know what that class does, and then we have the the guy with an 8 constitution and all these social skills, we're going into the fucking north. And I'm like, you fucking assholes. That's not what this game is. And maybe like a couple early sessions where I did kind of feel like I was surprised by, you know, how proactive you guys were in going after the zealots. I kind of pictured like there was going to be this like ambush and like kind of this mystery. You'd try to find out more, but there wasn't, and you move on, and I could add more later. But it's like, nope, we're going to sit here. We're going to do this counter intel and you know,
You know us. You should expect that. Come on.
So it was kind of the realization of like, yeah, you just have to let good players are going to challenge a DM and in the end create a better story, and have to remember that from day one, which I always should.
I felt like you were resistant. I felt like you were resistant at first to us pushing against the sort of
The
direction that you thought the game was going to go, or like, you know, like maybe you had like a structure of like where you thought it was going to go. And I felt like as the game went on, you started to kind of trust us more to break out of your mold and do weird things.
That gets back to my first question. Knowing you're on mic, knowing you're making a product, knowing you want it to go a certain way, there's a lot of merit in thinking that way. And I would dare say almost impossible to not sometimes think that way. You're launching a show.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was kind of the whole thought of initially, like, this is going to be easy. It's a system we know.
Yes.
It's going to be a pretty clear, straightforward going after a monster, get our feet wet, get comfortable with it. So yeah, I think I probably did have some resistance because not normally I'm all
Right.
about that.
Yeah.
And I think I got caught too much in, well, we kind of have like this arc.
We gotta
Like I don't
go.
want to railroad it, but I want it to be like thematically consistent. We're going to go after this thing. And it definitely started bouncing around more. And then I'd be like, well, fucking dude, just sit in the back and just let them go and try to make good situations.
So I always try to stay out of my players' way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you just have to realize that it's the same thing when you're doing a podcast.
Sure. And Josh, I mean, to your credit, you're good at that. You know, staying out of players' way and working off script and stuff. But I definitely got the impression that because this is something that was new to us recording, that you were a little resistant to some of those things.
Yeah.
You know, like and you know, also to your credit, you did I don't think you expected us to do the whole thing in the tavern where we found that dude and
Not at all. None of that was remotely prepared.
yeah.
And that's kind of, you know, my fear early on too, is like, I'd have no problem improving at the table, but there was a little bit more of like, I have zero preparation for this. And like, is it going to sound like shit? Like around a table, if a scene doesn't, you know, totally hit,
Nope, nobody cares.
nobody really cares. But now like, hey, that's a whole fucking episode. And like, is it a dud? And at the end of the day, just have to know that like, you guys are great players and it's never really going to be a dud. Even if I kind of fart something out there, you guys are into your characters and you're going to make something of it.
And for the listener, what a listener may not know, a listener who's role played may not consider is that you sit down and you record for 4 hours. Take recording out of it. You sit down to play Dungeons and Dragons. We've all done it 1,000 times for 4 hours. You got a good hour of horseshit in there.
Yeah.
Now you record for 4 hours. What do you do with that hour of horseshit? That's hard. That's hard. You know, that's the part that people don't see. We don't just, there are podcasts out there and they're fine. They push record. They record the entire fucking thing. They hit stop. They put it out. Some people do that. Some people, that's how they want to do it. That's fine. But that's not what we're going for. And it does present issues as a game master for pacing. If you think it's hard to run a session for 3 or 4 hours, try running a session. So hats off to Josh for 3 or 4 hours and going, we need to stop here because this is an episode. We got to stop here from this and then kind of trying to make that stop compelling. That's super hard to do. So, you know, maybe you had the restraints on us a little bit in the beginning, but I think ultimately it served its purpose. And then as you got more comfortable, you were like, okay, I know how to do this now. And you just let it go. And it got better and better and better as far as I'm concerned. So good job.
Yeah. And I think also to the point of it being a one shot and, you know, trying to keep in that realm, I think that we found as a group in general, outside of the podcast, that a lot of times the one shots that we jump into tend to be, if we like them enough, they become a campaign. And, it's a good mark that everybody is having a great time, that people don't want it to end, don't want we don't want to kill the Osgrim just yet, because we want to see what all this stuff in the north is about, or the council, or what the Elder are all about. Like that the mark that is a good game and that you're having fun also means that presumably the audience is
Of course.
I've been thinking about that a lot, John, and I think the reason for that is because it is more collaborative when it's these sort of one shots. Yeah. Because we don't do all the world building up front. Like when we play a big campaign, when someone's like, I'm going to run a D&D campaign, buckle up, we're going to be in it for 4 years. Like they usually
math on the wall, bitch.
right. They usually draw a bunch of maps and they invent gods and politics and everything. And it's cool, but it's the players are discovering something that the Dungeon Master has already provided, as opposed to a lot of these one shots where we start with a blank slate and we're collectively inventing it as we go along, which makes everyone, I think, more invested.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what makes us ultimately enjoy those worlds more, because we're building them collaboratively.
It's interesting to think that, like, you would think that the sit down, write, build world style may feels like it would build more cohesive and interesting worlds, but it seems like every time we've done a one shot inside Podcast and Out, I think we've always enjoyed it more than we maybe thought we would initially, or at least maybe it's a throw out, or we're going to try this system or whatever. And every single time it always ends up being like twice or 3 times as long as we think we're going to do.
I think, if I may, real quick, because I'll forget this shit. If I think why ultimately it works is for the same reason when the Dungeon Master, Game Master, Storyteller, when the person running the game incorporates your background into the story, you feel invested. So you're front loading that.
When you're skipping a step, basically.
You're front loading that when you collaboratively start working on a world. I think a real sweet spot is if, kind of like we've done in the past, where the DM's like, hey, I have this idea. Here's sort of a general outline, and we're going to fill in the blanks as we go. Like, that's shit I really like too. But I think you can have here's the entire world, here's everything fleshed out, and then you got players who can write a background into that, and then you're just waiting for that moment where you hope your background comes into it. You don't have to do that if I named that tavern. It gives you a little more buy-in right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Cool. I just wanted to throw it to Matt to chime in, because Matt, I mean, you've been playing for a fucking while now. And we think about it. I keep thinking of you as like, well, Matt hasn't played as long as everybody else, but it's been some years now, and it shows. But is this probably the most world building you've done in a game, and how did it feel?
Absolutely. I mean, the first time I played was in Regnum. And like, that was a world that you guys had started and built already. So like, I really enjoyed playing those characters and being a part of those stories. But like, I always kind of felt like I didn't know what was going on, because I didn't have any part of like, like the High Court was, where a lot of our shit took place. I had zero knowledge or interest in what was happening in the High Court, because like, I wasn't there to help you guys build it. There was no background for me. So with this, like, I've got the fucking note cards of stuff about this game that like, as we were playing, like, I was like, oh, like, this would be kind of cool to happen up there, or like, I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
I think it's the difference between asking permission to add something to the story than just saying, oh no, this is what happens because we're all making it up and I'm making up this part of it.
Yeah.
And I don't really need the permission from the DM to do that because we're all adults and we can build a story together.
Sure.
And I think there is a balancing act where sometimes it's great to do that, but I know as a player, sometimes I want the world to feel real around me. And there's moments, and not always. There's games where like the collaborative nature and like being part of it, but I have had experiences where that world building part of it can kind of break a little bit of immersion because I'm not the character. I'm a player at the table who's contributing to this story. So I don't know. I think that they're very different, and I wouldn't go so because I think John and Jake, I think you guys are pretty far down the path of kind of like just liking that more. And there's a part of me as a player that I still sometimes I enjoy participating in somebody else's story that is immersive and real, and I can explore on my own and it is somebody else's world that I can reveal.
You're a young vampire and you walk into the succubus club. You don't want to know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
You want to be like, whoa, I didn't expect any of it. Right there. So there's some settings.
Maybe it's settings. Maybe
some
it's,
settings might you know if you're playing a setting where your character's largely ignorant to the goings on, maybe if you're playing paranormal investigators in the world of darkness, maybe you don't want to know the world building.
Yep.
Maybe you just want to know relationships with the family, relationships with each other, and in those tight knit things, and let the setting come to you a little bit, right?
And part of it is putting the weight on making your world building be the most relevant to your character.
For sure.
You know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it does. It depends on the tone of the game that you want. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think they're both great things. But you know, your example of like the paranormal investigator things is perfect because we've played games where it's like, all right, you guys make mortal characters, and people are like, well, can I play a wizard? Blah blah blah. And it's like, I'm not going to tell you any of those things. You'll find out.
Right.
You know, and that can be can be awesome. Like it's unwrapping the mystery and discovering.
If you're playing
things about the
paranormal
world.
investigators and like you go into the house, you're like, all right, tell me what you find. You're like, a fucking ghost, I guess. Like,
I think the setting is key though, because paranormal investigators, the whole excitement of that is living in what you believe is a tiny world that suddenly gets gigantic.
Right.
Versus playing in a world of Dungeons and Dragons where you're like, I kind of want to know the culture and these people and our relationship to them because that informs me as a character and it informs me as a player. Whereas if I'm an investigator, I kind of want the world to be uncovered as we go. Nice. Cthulhu or Cthulhu, however you say it. Anything like that. You want to be like, well, I don't know what's in here, you know?
right. So, as kind of a last chunk, I just wanted to throw it around for anybody that wants to point out like a character moment that they really liked, somebody else's character or their own, like a moment with their own character, part of the game, questions they have about any, you know, for each other, for me.
I got 3.
And we'll just bang them out.
Less character moments, just 3 story moments. Number 1, I distinctly remember, it might have been the day Jake and I drove here together, but the dream sequence moment, I think, was a pivotal moment in that game, and it felt excellent. It felt it really drove the story home, and it added just this interesting layer to it. This idea, I think it really put us in the culture. You know, we have these 4 characters that are trying to figure shit out. 2 have these weird motivations. 1's from there. And, you know, we can imagine what we can imagine with description. But, you know, you're not writing Stephen King paragraphs of descriptions. You're not writing Edgar Allan Poe descriptions of a mansion and really doing that. That's hard to do. So when we got into the dream sequence, I felt like it really gave us a sense of where we were and what was going on. So much so that scene was so good that it inspired me as a player to change Adric. So I want to compliment you on that because I think that was a very pivotal moment. The Oasis moment was amazing. Like Jake said, it's almost a shame we didn't get to do a little bit more with it. I just love this idea. It kind of reminded me of the last skit of Heavy Metal where all these people live around this volcano and then it blows up and corrupts everybody. I just had this weird like Heavy Metal art vision in my head while we were all hiding looking at this Oasis like, wow, it's paradise. This is crazy, you know? So that really stuck in my head as a visual, of course. And of course, the end, just this description of this sort of lagoon setting where the Arctogrim was. Those are just three major cinematic. I can see it in the theater of my mind moments of the movie in this case. But those really stood out to me. And there's plenty of great role playing character moments, which I think we talked about as we went through and throw each other character points and shit. But
I
that's
definitely
me.
say I was probably the most nervous about that dream, the test, the trial, the stages. I was pretty confident about the animal part. I knew that was going to go well. The first and the third one, I was really worried about, but how I think they turned out really well. And that was also the moment where I'm like, okay, these guys will make anything work. Like that. If I think I was already starting to come around as a DM, being like, just DM like you DM. Don't worry as much about the podcast, but do be aware of it. And then it was just like, okay, I can just kind of throw shit and they'll make fucking cinema out of it. So
I think for me, I mean the Battle of the Haval, and then kind of how that led us to be a bit more integrated or a bit more accepted in the North, and kind of entwined with like Jan. Like you didn't have many NPCs, but that was like the real only NPC that I really cared about.
yeah.
And then well,
Didn't last long.
well, he died.
They always die.
Yeah, but like you know, having that integration, having that like character moment there, and then also the character moment between Hoffman and Keeler of like trying to convince Keeler to not break the party apart by going along with the cruel punishment,
Yep.
but also accepting the fact that, you know, and trying to convey that to Adric, and trying to walk both the tightrope on both sides was pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a good example of, you know, I think Hoffman was the main character for that whole arc of the story,
Easy,
was the
yeah.
linchpin and things like that. And it just, how the story kind of naturally, like some moments, it just, the arc will shine on different you know,
Right.
people. And it just happened, I think
At
at
the
the
end
end,
was-
Adric and Avery were kind of at that spot.
Right.
I was I'm with Dean, where I think the dream sequence part for me was the best part. And I think it was cool because you kind of took the reins off and gave us a lot of creative liberty to make shit up in those scenes, you know, and that was really fun. I think that was really the turning point where I was like, oh, okay, I'm not upset that I made this character anymore. Yeah. Cause like up until then it was like, fuck, like maybe I should have played someone nice.
I should have been a nice boy with
Yeah, right.
with less nice hair.
So yeah, and it was just really cool scenes. Though, and everyone like just came up with cool things. That was really cool. The Haval part as well. Like right after the Haval, I think we were all figuring out how to play our characters at that point. We had all like after that fight, it seemed like we were all more in our character's skin. And I liked that a lot too. I don't know if that was necessarily a moment that happened, but that's when I started to notice like that people were really getting into the characters. And I think one thing that helped do that was having that merit and flaw and bond sheet. Like you had printed out, and I think I took a picture. I'll post it up on Instagram or something. But that was such a handy reference to just look at and be like, how am I going? What is my character going to do? And I would look at that and I'd go, okay, here's his goal. This is what I'm going to do because this is my goal, you know? And just having all of that information right in front of us made it just easier to role play. Sure. Yeah.
Dope.
Yeah, I think for me, I really enjoyed. I think I should put it more. I think I will really enjoy the dream sequence when I hear it. It's just as a character in it,
fuck
like
you.
the puzzles were really hard. Like I was sitting here like, oh my God, I don't understand half of what he's fucking saying over there. Like, thank God these other guys are gonna be able to figure this out. Because if it was up to me, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. And then I guess for a question, and also weirdly, I kind of hope that the guy that I took off onto that island and set free, like in a small way, I kind of hoped he would wind up like coming back to fight me at some point in time. Like I still kind of hope he shows back up for Keeler, or if he wasn't being controlled like doesn't, and I actually was, Keeler was merciful to him, and he didn't just kill him because he was under the control of the Arctil Grim. So
Dope. Yeah, Keeler deserves a epilogue. Yeah, I'll say it's I think anybody, if you run a game, you have like, for everything that you're like proud of and psyched of, you have like 3 things that are like, fuck, should have done that differently, could have done that better, whatever. But, I think some stuff turned out well. But like in general, when I think back about favorite moments, it's the unexpected shit that I didn't write that you guys did. Like I never would have thought you guys would have tried to get Dr. Hoffman possessed by Arctil Grim.
Oh, that was another moment. Yeah,
Like, what
that
the
was a
fuck?
great
You're going to
moment.
do what? And even though it did like afterwards, like I was worried about some of the editing, the Keeler, just the assertiveness of the characters to say like, I'm taking this guy and this is what we do with him. I think was just awesome. Like a dramatic thing. And it did set up a lot of tension. And like, yeah, it got us off the rails in a way. But when I look back, I'm like, that's a fucking awesome moment. And how much more does it pay off when, the characters resolve?
Imagine watching that as a movie just for a second. We've all seen Game of Thrones. We all watched Hard Home, these moments in the snow. Imagine Hoffman with these fucking buggy eyes looking at somebody like Keeler, who we know is this amazing northern warrior, this, attribute him to like this great wildling fighter or the Lord of Bones or some shit. And Hoffman in this wild-eyed stare just looks at him and he goes, flee. And Keeler just turns and bolts through the snow. Like, imagine seeing that. You'd be like, fuck, these guys are fucked. Yeah. That'd be really cinematic to watch.
I will note to the audience, I took a level of Warlock at the end. I only used my Warlock spells against the party.
Thank you. Do you got a resurrection one handy?
No.
I think he deserves inspiration in the next game for that.
Oh, and one shameless pat on the back on top of any of the others I snuck in there. But I will say, I thought that last combat went fucking about as
I was going to say
100%.
we're not mechanical driven players, and that was like a big boss fight with a bunch of fucking stats and actions, and I almost never have ever run shit like that. And
I think that was having a boss fight like that. It can always feel anticlimactic in games where you're just hitting him with a sword and then he hits you. But it felt like it was the whole cavern was against us, really, and that it was this epic fight to the death. Yeah,
and that's one of the things I want to credit you with. I think as a storyteller, DM, game master, I think, and I'm sure you guys will back me up on this. I think it's always important to make sure that the players have a sense of danger. Otherwise, what are we doing with the climaxes and great battles? Which again is why I don't care about Aedric's death, right? Because I think that lends weight to knowing that this is a possibility. And I think when we went into that cavern, I think at that point we thought, we're in big fucking trouble here. Like, this thing has been, I think the story was successful in that it built up the legend of Arctil Grim enough to where when we were in that cave with him, we knew we were in for a serious fucking confrontation. And I think that really matters for a one shot at a monster big boss fight at the end. We were like, oh boy, you could tell when there's a moment where I think I yelled, "I'm born for this," because that's how exciting it was.
fucking crit, fucking 60
right? Because you're in for it, and that we fucking shock and awed him up early. We used all our points because when he goes, it's fucking hell's bells.
Literally, I was like, all right, I need to use every single ability I have before I die. Like, gotta empty the tank.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. As much as we talk about collaborative story building and what other systems do great, and we shit on D&D, I think, amongst each other a lot, I will say when something goes really well like that, and it's hard to match those mechanics with like partial success. Describe how you do the damage.
A lot rides on the number.
Sometimes mechanics can add.
I agree.
And I would say that was one of the
They added, if the mechanics are either adding to the story or they're not.
Yeah.
Right. And if they're adding to the story, excellent. And if they're not, you scrap them.
I mean, I think a lot of it, not to toot our own horns, but like I think a lot of it comes down to how the players play it. Like you can
Oh,
just
yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Players are the best.
Like, pour it on, baby. Fuck the DM. We sucked his dick long enough.
Well, like I think not putting it on the DM as much, like, and the fact that we, are able to be more descriptive than what we're doing, instead of like, okay, I hit him with my sword, and then the DM's like, okay, you reach back and
Totally.
you take a slash at his, like, one person can only come up with so many fucking adjectives before you're just stuck in like,
Snicker snack.
yeah, so I think Josh
great
did a
point.
great job in like building the story, but allowing us to like fill in more than you normally get to, or you normally hear people in a D&D campaign. I shoot him with my bow. Oh, fucking cool.
Speaking of mechanics kind of helping to propel the story, I think our house rules really helped. Like, and I don't think we'll ever play D&D without those house rules again, to be honest. The way we used inspiration, it was mechanically, it furthered the game, but it also helped us to stay on track with how our characters were acting,
Sure.
and the merits and flaws, and especially once we decided, like, these are going to evolve. That they were just very handy things to have, and
That's
it
a great
did
fucking
definitely elevate the game. One thing I was thinking about with that whole thing, though, we had many awkward conversations where we're like, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm good at role playing. Thanks, guys." Like accepting the accolades can be challenging. And I think the one tweak I'd make to our house rules is not to give people inspiration for acting on their merit, because to me
Act
it's
on the flaw.
it's
Yeah.
weird to be like, whoa, well,
I'm
my
brave.
character is calculating and plans ahead, so I've got this stuff and I get an inspiration.
Totally.
I think a different way to do the merits would be to cash in those inspiration points to invoke that merit.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You know what I like about that idea too is it also, points aside from a mechanical standpoint, it reinforces that you're acting in character and other people are kind of pointing it out, almost sort of reminding you, yeah, keep doing that thing.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
cool. Just even cool points aside, just the idea of that being a factor is really cool. But I do like that tweak.
Quick mechanical question. How did you guys feel about when you got that one opportunity mid-story to resolve things, add new ones as a reward, giving you guys that one auto crit? How did that feel? Did it feel
Outstanding when I rocked the fucking Octogram's face off with lightning damage like fucking Thor.
Did it feel rewarding to use it, knowing that it was
It plays right into what I said about the final scene. I didn't feel so. I'm gonna can I answer your question with a question?
Yeah.
So this is gonna be a DM hot seat. Does Josh ever, when he runs a game, have a combat that's like kind of easy? Or are they all a fucking nightmare? Can somebody answer me? You guys been playing with it for fucking years. So that played into what was good about this game, though. I'm teasing you a little, but my point is, going into the cave, I was like, all right, I got some stuff. I got a couple inspiration points. I got a cool little hammer that I wish was a little bigger. and I got this crit, and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm all right. I'm gonna do stuff. I'm gonna do damage. Like, I'm not gonna walk in and just get iced. Like, that's again why his death is fine when you dump 100+ on the thing. If I would have if we walked in and just got iced, I would have been like, that's what a fucking bummer,
I thought it. I don't know if I necessarily saw it as like, oh, this is a cool reward, but I thought, a lot of times in D&D, you'll be like, oh, I'm gonna do this really cool heroic thing, and then you roll a 1, and you're like, oh, what the fuck? So it's good to have that in your back pocket, just to help you with the story, like you the player, push the story in the way you want, and doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to make your character into some amazing badass, but like my character Avery, like the one thing he was really good at is like deceiving people, and like his whole class is built around that. But still, D&D, like a D20 is so swingy. So
Yes.
you get that one opportunity to roll deception, and now it's like cool if you roll
Or a knowledge check.
Right. And it's like awesome. My character failed at the one opportunity he had to do the one thing he's good at.
Yeah.
So it's good to have it to kind of put it back on track when you need to.
Can I ask a question mechanically? Maybe a house rule could exist where you just say eliminate a 1. Instead of changing it to a crit, maybe there's like a scrap a 1 or take a reroll on like this pivotal moment.
I wanted to make it before you had to do it before you rolled, because I wanted it to be I'm picking my spot
That makes
to
sense.
make a big impact
Yeah.
in the
That makes
story,
sense.
and not like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
And I wonder if, John, you feel differently because we did kind of fuck it up with yours
Yeah.
a little bit, and if it felt like a little less.
No, I mean, it's on me mostly for forgetting that I have the 20 there. And I felt it was good though, because to what Jake says, there's going to be a time where you definitely want your character to shine for whatever reason. And being able to pick that moment as a player is great. It's like like in Fate, where you're spending a Fate to introduce a story element. It's kind of the same idea where you're gonna introduce a story element and you want to do it. You want to roll that 20.
Yeah, I honestly was saving mine. I wanted to, when Adric went down, like my first thought to it, because I still had mine at that point, was like, I'm going to use it to try to save him. But then he got swallowed. And I was like, well, that's useless now. So I'm just going to use it. Like, same thing with not
Crit
using the
is.
Frostbane. Was like, I was saving that Frostbane because like somebody else might
I
need
was
this.
so stingy with it.
Take the goddamn thing.
The DM's like, I'm going to freeze your faces off. I was like, all right, if you don't squirt this stuff on your face.
All right, guys. Final thoughts. Once more around anything to add on one shot and this hopefully beloved cast of characters, Dean.
No, I mean, I think the natural evolution for this point is for the Order of the Blackstone to give way to what the New Testament will be, which is the Order of Aedric. So I expect to be elevated into deity status and
saint.
return with stats you guys aren't going to believe. Okay?
No, I thought it was excellent, and I definitely would want to go back to see what Hoffman's up to in the future.
Cool.
Yeah, I was very happy with how it wrapped up. Part of me was hoping that that Matt was going to kill Octogrim. Part of me was hoping that when I blew the horn the last time and he shot it, he was going to kill it, because I just thought it seemed more fitting that he did. But overall, I was very happy with how my character arc wrapped up and with that final confrontation and everything. And I think Avery probably joined the Order of the Black and is wearing fucking Adric's crest, and isn't going to court anymore. Doesn't give a fuck about that stuff.
That's one other spot of sometimes you gotta like not fudging hit points on the monster in the final boss fight and just trying to make it organic, and it ended up being that fucking acid thing.
I like to think he choked on Aedric.
All right, Matt.
I had a great time, and I guess I just want to say thanks for fucking helping tell a great story, boys.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
You did great, man. Great voice. Shit, that was awesome.
Cheers to you guys. And final for me is, hey, fucking idiot, trust your players. Trust your fucking players. All right, we'll see you next arc.
Take it easy.
Peace.
Thank you guys so much for having listened to our first arc, One Shot of the Monster. God, we had fun with it. And we're excited. We got a lot more to come. We'll be kicking off Arc 2 Into the Storm immediately next week. Now that it's all out there, perfect time to go and tell somebody, hey, check out Nastygram. If you guys liked it, find somebody else who would like it. Tell them about it, write a review, share it, whatever you want to do. There's a great arc to binge, and we'll see you right back here next week for a new beginning.
Dreams of fame that will never come true. Spend all our days watching the world fade away. Dance until the lights go out.
That's nasty.
I mean, I think it's just a cool opportunity to talk about the campaign, talk about the characters.
Josh was like, I just want you guys to talk about how great the
Talk
game
about-
was.
talk about-
about an hour.
I'd like everyone to list your 10 favorite things that I did.
Number 10.
And we'll go around. We'll do everybody's number 10s
Yeah, yeah.
and then everybody's number 9s.
Josh, get up in the middle of the table.
Everyone jerk him off.
No, but more like,
Holy fuck.
good
That's